Bienvenidos todos a esta
Welcome everybody to this HIV 2020 online session on strengthening security and protect and safety of people living with HIV and MSM men, gay men and bisexual men. So let's start giving you instructions on how can you listen for the interpretation services into English, French, Portuguese. This session will be held in Spanish. So in the bottom of your screen, you will see a interpretation icon. You can choose there the audio channel by selecting interpretation and then the language that you would like to listen to. The interpretation will be into English, French, Russian, and Portuguese.
Algunas instrucciones de la participación.
Some of the participation guidelines
facilitar la participación.
For you to make it easier on our presentation.
Estas están totalmente cero para cualquier tipo de intimidación.
Entonces, HIV 2020 online sessions are a neutral space and they operate under this zero tolerance policy. These presentations will be shared in the social media platforms. So remember that this is not a private conversation. You can change your names as this information will be available.
Y bueno, vamos a iniciar entonces.
So now let's start with this HIV 2020 online session.
Ahora creo que sí puedo poner mi pantalla. Bienvenidos todos.
Welcome everybody. My name is Omar Baños. I'm a technical counselor of MPAC. This is a global organization that works in favor of sexual health and sexual rights for gay men and MSM. So within this topic of dealing with the gay people and men MSM, we will have 4 experts in this area, such as Gonzalo Aburto, Dr. Jorge Saavedra, and Sergio Lopez. So before introducing each one of them, I will let you know. But just following the instructions, we will have the participation of each one of the speakers. Then we will follow a Q&A session, and afterwards we will keep on with the next speaker. As for the Q&A, we will be using the Q&A chat. So there you can write down your questions or your comments, and then I will be in charge of sharing them with the audience. And of course, I will kindly ask the speakers to answer those questions. This session is considered to speak about safety and protection on gay men, bisexual men, and another MSM, as well as on the staff of health services delivery. So we will be speaking about the HIV criminalization, gay men, bisexual men. We will speak about also the risks and what to do once these health services are implemented, and what is the risk that they are facing while delivering these services. We will discuss about also the strategies, and as well as in the situation of Venezuela, Central America, and how does this affect and impact security of this population. We will also share information on the political will of young gay men, bisexual men, what they can do, and what does it mean. So first I would like to start welcoming Gonzalo Aburto. He is Mexican and lives in New York City, and he is founder member of the Mexican Network of Organizations Against Criminalization of HIV and Latinx+. This is a network of people living with HIV in the United States, and he is director of this Initiative for Latin America of Zero project. Gonzalo was part of the Lambda group of homosexual liberation, and he's a founder member of the RTA, the Revolutionary Party of Workers, in 1976. He's also co-founder and director of Jóvenes in Spanish, the magazine, an HIV magazine, and treatment for the Latino community in the United States. So, Gonzalo, the floor is yours. We have 15 minutes for your presentation, and then afterwards we will open the session for the Q&A. Your microphone is mute. Now, can you hear me now? Yes. Thank you, Omar. It is a pleasure, and it is a great pleasure being able to be here today, especially because during the last hour I was able to connect. I was trying to connect and not being able to do so in this half an hour that we try or that we attempt to run a rehearsal. Thank you for inviting me. My name is Gonzalo Aburto, and I live in New York City. I'm Mexican. Since 1986, I'm living here in New York, and I've been working since 1981 dealing with these topics of HIV and AIDS. Currently, I'm working with Zero Project. Zero Project is an organization that it's formed by people living with HIV here in the United States, and that we are trying and that we are working in favor of eliminating criminalization as well as a prosecution against people living with HIV in the US as well as around the world. This Zero Project initiative has been really successful in the sense that we've been able to try to educate not only the community as such, but also now we are expanding our services, and we're just reaching Latin America and the Caribbean countries. So, as you know, after nearly more than 40 years of the appearance of the HIV and AIDS epidemic in the world, it has been a fight. It has been a struggle from the beginning. And I can tell you that one of the most important things that had happened in terms of this fight against the AIDS pandemic is that it has taught us that organizations of people living with HIV through all these 40 years has been the most important tool, and has been the tool that allows us to contrast many things, mainly at the beginning of the disease. So for many youngsters, for many young people, this is the main topic that we are trying to share with everybody, with these new generations. Not only what was done at the beginning of the disease, at the beginning of the epidemic, but also one of the things that we need to remember is that the organization and as well as the networks of people living with HIV had been the ones that made the situation in many cases had been really meaningful, and that they had improved meaningfully with regards of the topic of HIV and AIDS. After 40 years, we can say that maybe in some places we can state that living with HIV is not a death sentence. But unfortunately, this is not the case for everybody, or it is not the case all around the world. Mainly in the Caribbean and in Latin America and the Caribbean countries, where we have faced different waves. We've always lived in this crisis situation, and the situation that they are facing and that they live with these fights of those who live with HIV, it's completely different to the one that happens in some other countries, such as industrialized countries or countries such as the United States or Western European Western countries. The situation for people living with HIV, and that also some of them in our Latin American countries, they are still developing AIDS, and this is just a matter of survival. And then HIV criminalization is the way we can say that this is the most terrible situation that we can face based on stigma and discrimination through all these 4 decades. This is what we had faced, we people living with HIV. And that is basically because those organizations that work with HIV and AIDS in Latin American and the Caribbean countries are organizations that are trying to survive and that they are trying to collect funds in order to continue their programs. Sometimes within the activities that we develop here in Latin America, and when we want to speak about criminalization, this is a matter that it's not well understood, and that it is not understood because it is unknown. Even though we know and we have the knowledge that there are some cases and that there are people that had been imprisoned and that they had suffered illegal consequences, such as losing their job, or even they've been their freedom has been taken off just because of the fact of living with HIV. Mainly, these accusations are not the ones that can be sustained, scientifically speaking, as there is a broad evidence that HIV transmission is not possible if one person has their viral load undetectable and if they also take their drugs. And even if they don't use condoms in their sexual intercourse. So that's evident. That evidence confirms we have those scientific studies that are supported by different organizations and universities, such as UNAIDS and some other health international organizations. So we've been able to inform about that in order to teach and to educate people about this situation. Unfortunately, as for the case of criminalization of HIV in our countries, is something that we need to take it to several organizations that are dealing with the fight against AIDS in these countries. This is also understandable because of the stigma and this prestige that this situation of this disease is faced in many countries. This is just a matter of this is a situation that it's dealt in at many levels, in the family, in the school, in the workplace, and in all the other social sectors where we share and we live. So this is something that allows us to promote this work, and this is the driver that we follow. For instance, in Mexico, we had the possibility of creating the Mexican network of organizations who fight against HIV criminalization. This is an organization, this is a national organization that was founded in October 2017, based on the fight that was given at that moment in order to call the attention of the situation felt in the state of Veracruz, where one of the articles of the constitution of that state, the state of Veracruz, criminalized specifically those living with HIV. So through Zero Project, as well as on Zero Project Justice Network, which is this organization that gathers at a worldwide level most of the organizations that prevail in the world, and that are dealing with these type of activities. We were able to achieve and to organize a meeting in Mexico City where we have more than 40 organizations, base community organizations. And at that time, those organizations decided to form the Mexican network of organizations against HIV criminalization. So this red has been working since then, and I can tell you that thanks to the effort of these organizations that belong to this network of organizations, we had the final resolution for the Justice Court in Mexico that they rule that Article 156, 158 of the Constitution of the state of Veracruz was unconstitutional, and therefore they demanded to release it. So this was very important in terms of the job that we had done, and it also happened in Colombia. In Colombia, the criminal code of that country also had these criminalization issues at a national level for those living with HIV. Thanks to the effort of a special group of activists and lawyers from that country, from Colombia, we were able to achieve that after the support given terms of Zero Project as well as on HIV Justice Network, we were able to achieve that the Supreme Court of Colombia in 2018, also they declared that that section of the criminal code was unconstitutional, where they in that article they criminalize HIV people living with HIV. So those are the most relevant activities that we have done with regards of this fight against HIV and AIDS in terms of the HIV criminalization of people living with HIV. We also know that for young people, it is important to get to know about this type of fight, because the reality that young people live right now, for those who are facing this type of situations, it's really far away from what we lived at the beginning of the epidemic, when stigma was stronger and suffering that people living with HIV faced was really, really strong. That has changed thanks to all the fight that we had, that all the people living with HIV had given through all these years. Through all these years, the story of the disease also teaches us that, speaks about all these changes that we've been able to make, and the fact that young people had and supposedly the benefit of receiving treatment as well as medicine as well as drugs that allow them that maybe this situation that they are facing, it's just considered as a chronic disease rather than a different one. And this is because of all the networks from all the organizations of people living with HIV had been the drivers that had promoted all those changes through all these processes. So this is something that we need to rescue, and this is something that we also need to share with all young people. Or that's what we need to share nowadays, because in so many countries of Latin America, and not only there, also here in the US, where we can say that maybe everything is solved. That's not true. The figures show us that most of the higher the amount of HIV infections among Latino young people living in the US, and as well as young people in Latin American countries, it's given between gay men. And this is something that we need to pay our focus in regards of education, and It is not only the fact that because this exists today, or because we have PrEP, or because we have this prophylaxis to prevent, we cannot tell that this is like the magical recipe that will allow us to make everything else disappear. As we know, PrEP, it is not a tool that it's available for most of young people in Latin America. Most of those living in HIV, also living in Latin America, are more concerned on getting a better condition, a better life condition. They are also more concerned, and they are also more worried on the fact on how can they achieve to have access to their drugs, to their medication. How can they can have access to these health and care services? And we have seen that in the case, for instance, of Mexico. Mexico, it's a great example where since 2019 and with the beginning of the new government, of the new administration, we can say that the lack of medication, the lack of treatment for HIV in many of the country, in many of the states of the country, was a great scandal, where there were thousands of people who were not able to have access to their drugs, to their medication, and that they suffered a lot. And even today, that problem has not been solved totally. As for HIV criminalization, despite the fact that we know that there are some cases in some other countries also, unfortunately, we don't have specific figures or specific data that can let us know exactly how many cases are there and where. That is why I also take this opportunity for those who deal with these activities in Latin America, be aware of this fact, because this is something that it's not spoken about. It is not mentioned that maybe those who are incarcerated, or that maybe those who had suffered legal persecution because of their HIV status, that situations, that those examples are not spoken. So incarceration is one of the ways where we can tell cruelty lived in these cases. But it is also a matter of some other cases where you can say that access to service or to treatment is denied, or that there are also people that they are not able to get a job because of their HIV status. And this is something that we need to be aware of. Omar, your 15 minutes are over. If you can close your presentation. Yes, sure. Well, I just want to reiterate here that, and to highlight the invitation, I would like to invite you to be aware of this, to be aware of all the situation that we are facing right now. And if there's something similar to this, just let us know. You can inform, you can be informed at the website of the conference for any type of information that you can contact us within Zero Project, or you can go zeroproject.com, and then there you can find the information needed. So thank you, Omar. Thank you, Gonzalo. Now we will open the channel for you to give comments or questions to Gonzalo, or what we can do just to leave it at the end of the 4 speakers once that they finished. We can do that also, just to save time. As you wish, Omar. Yes. Yes, it is important. We were just we just wanted to mention these points. And then there's one comment here. We also need to analyze the lack of the indifference of the health service providers, because these are one of the main entities that criminalize. For instance, there in one state of Mexico, they are just mentioning in the chat. Also, you can post your questions at the Q&A chat, where we can just follow up your questions and your comments. So what we can do, let's move on to the next presentation. And if there are some questions, we can keep on with the next one. Please just take notes and write them down. And at the end, we will try to comment and give answers to those. Thank you very much. And this is really important to know exactly the history. Where are we at and where do we come from? In order to improve the quality of life of people living with HIV. I would like to introduce Robin now. She has a master's degree in public health. So she also is part of the FHI 30. Sorry, it seems that his microphone is muted. Just give me a second to introduce her. She's been working in health public issues for more than 15 years, including development, implementation, and evaluation of responses on violence, reproductive health, and HIV in the United States, in Latin America, and in the Caribbean countries, as well as in South Africa. And she runs the efforts for those who implement programs, HIV programs, under the linkages group that are supported by USAID and PEPFAR. So welcome, Robin. Robin will give her speech in English. So for those of you who are listening in Spanish, you can use the interpretation icon where it says English and Spanish, and then click on the Spanish option for you to listen in Spanish. She will speak in English, and then the interpretation will be done in Spanish, French, Portuguese, and Russian. Welcome.
All right, thank you so much, Omar. I'm going to start sharing my screen. So just let me know when that's successful, when you can see that screen. So Omar, are you seeing my screen?
Yes. Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. All right. So I'm going to start with video, but then I understand that for both the Facebook live stream and also later when we're using online polling, it's better if I just present my slides. So for this first slide, it's really wonderful to be here with you all. Sorry about this. Okay, it's wonderful to be here with you all, and just thank you so much to the organizers, the other panelists, and also the interpreters. I'm really appreciative of the overview that Gonzalo just gave. I think he did a really nice job of describing the risks that are faced and also the way that those security risks play out in impacting services that are available for gay, bisexual, and other men who have sex with men. So what I'm going to be focusing on today is actually what we can do to prevent and mitigate harms to those who are providing the services. And we'll talk a little bit about the wide range of groups that are included in that group of HIV service implementers. And while what I share will focus on implementers, it really will also be relevant largely to other community members who are impacted by security issues. So I'm going to go ahead and switch off video. I can figure out how to do that, okay? And now I'm going to keep going with my slides. All right, so my objective for our time here together is really to review some tools that we've developed, processes that we've developed to strengthen implementer security. These include a stock-taking survey, guidance, and then training materials. What I really hope you'll take away from our short time together is that while security challenges faced by key population implementers are very real and can have very serious consequences to individuals and to organizations, there are ways that implementers can increase their security, and especially when those efforts include other stakeholders, such as donors, getting involved. And just so we're all on the same page about what we mean by security, we're talking about being free from risks or harm that come from intentional violence. So I won't be speaking, for example, about personal protective equipment for COVID-19 or hurricane preparedness. This will be about those who wish to cause harm to individuals because they're implementing key population programs. For a bit of context, the security work that I'm presenting here has really evolved under the USAID and PEPFAR-supported Linkages project and continues on into the EPIC project. Both of these projects focus on service delivery, so our security efforts extend across the prevention, care, and treatment cascade that you see here. When we first began our focus on implementer security, we found a gap in formal approaches to protecting key population program implementers from intentional harm. There has been a much longer and formal documented approach to protecting beneficiaries. So for example, Avahan in the early 2000s, or LGBT-led rights-focused organizations working on security of implementers, for example, through the Dignity for All Consortium. At the same time, when we were looking to see what had been formalized, we saw that there had been a lot done to actually document the harms caused. So this report from Impact Services Under Siege goes through the ways that especially organizations led by key population members are targeted with violence for the work that they do. So recognizing that there was a gap and that we wanted to be able to move forward and implement across our own projects and also to support others, Linkages partnered with Frontline Aids to develop a security toolkit. And this included impact from civil society organizations on the ground so that we could document their best practices. It included the global networks and also included those lessons learned from, for example, Avahan or Dignity for All. Linkages then partnered with Synergia, one of the Dignity for All Consortium members, to develop a training that I'll go over with you all today. And then we began working in the past year in the Middle East and North Africa with the Arab Foundation for Freedoms and Equality to really expand our work and think even more about hostile environments and how we do security in those settings, like Gonzalo talked about, where the laws haven't changed, where HIV and homosexuality are still criminalized. So I just want to give one more word on what we're talking about, because after this, I'm going to ask all of you all to let me know what's happening in your contexts. So for us, when we speak about security, we're including attacks on individual workers or organizations. So it could be, for example, deregistration or an attack on reputation. We're including physical, sexual, emotional, and economic abuse of workers. These can happen in the virtual or real world. And we do consider threats of violence to be incidents of security. So we know that somebody being threatened, for example, online has real impacts on their well-being mentally, sometimes physically, but also on the programming they're able to do. So we're not waiting for actual physical harm to come before we act. And when we think about program implementers, there's an extensive list here. So we want to be really inclusive. I won't go over all of these, but just to say that this includes those doing outreach in the community, those working in the clinics, directors and support staff, guards and drivers, receptionists, anybody who's trying to implement programs for key population members. So now what I'm going to do is share a survey with you all on Menti. So I'm hoping that what you can see here involves a website, www.menti.com, and then a code that you should enter to take part in this poll. So what I would like you to do is go to menti.com, enter in that code, and then answer this question. What are your organization's biggest security challenges when delivering HIV services to gay, bisexual, and other men who have sex with men? And you can choose up to 3. These include hacking and digital attacks. B is arrest and/or commodity confiscation during outreach. C is the sexual harassment of workers. D is emotional abuse, and this includes, for example, verbal abuse, yelling at workers. E is physical violence against workers. F is blackmail or attacks on the reputation of workers. And G is other. And if you select G as one of your choices, please go ahead and write into the chat, number 1 equals, or other equals, and then let us know what it is that you're talking about. So I see that 1 vote has come in. Thank you so much. And so we'll allow time for more to share their responses. Great. So it looks like the website is working well. And I apologize, I can't see the chat. So Omar, if anybody's having issues with the website and you need to call that to my attention, please do.
We'll let you know. But
okay, thank you. Okay, we'll let a few more responses come in. Okay, interesting. So I see we have right now more physical abuse than we have any other type of abuse. And our next question is actually going to be about perpetrators. I see a fair amount of hacking and digital attacks. And so it sounds like a lot of people are doing online programming. Blackmail, which is really common across programs for gay and bisexual men all around the world. And then the emotional abuse and the arrest and commodity confiscation. Okay, so I apologize to anybody who wants to enter a response and hasn't yet been able to. I do want to keep going. And just to highlight that this process is really important because security always happens in a context, right? So what keeps people safe in one place isn't necessary in another place or actually might put them at risk. So one of the first things that we do is always have a conversation about what security issues look like in a given setting. Okay, and again, just for the person who selected other, if you can please put into the chat what you mean, because it's great for us to continue to collect very specific examples. Okay. So now let's see if I can get it to advance to the next slide. Okay, so here's our final question. Who are the common perpetrators of abuse against workers at your organization? And here you can choose all that apply. So we have A, which is police and law enforcement. B, local, national government or authorities, so the local government there. All right, great, it's changed. I see votes coming in. C, general public. So for example, when you're out doing outreach, the verbal abuse that might occur. Family or neighbors of workers is D. So people who might do any kind of abuse because they know about the work that you're doing. E is religious and other community leaders. These can be directly done against the program, or it might be that they have a sermon where they talk about the need to rise up against the services provided and encourage others to commit violence. F is program beneficiaries, and we do put this here because we do hear about some cases, for example, of sexual harassment. And then again, G is other. So if you select G, as I see someone just did, if you can please put that into the chat, what you mean by other. And hopefully we can return to that if we have time during the question and answer. Okay, so again, this is super interesting. And so thinking about the last answers and how these align, we saw that there was a lot of physical violence. We saw that there was some commodity confiscation and arrest during outreach. And so it lines up then that the police and law enforcement Local and national government authorities can be involved in all of that. And then in the Latin American context, just thinking about religious and other community leaders who can play such a large role. So again, thank you. And this one will remain open, but I am going to go back to the PowerPoint slides, and we will make this poll available at the end so that you can see the responses. Okay. So now what I want to touch on briefly is what do we do then with that information? So we know that there is an issue and we want to be responsive. This is the process that we follow within EPIC and linkages to do the work to make sure that we're keeping implementers as safe as possible. So as an overview, there is a stock taking done at the individual level, there's a training, and then there's support to implement security plans. So I want to go into a little more detail on each step. Step one, the most important takeaways from this are that we really try to be expansive in our thinking about security. There are a lot of different ways to stay safe. These different domains are really diverse, so all the way from cultivating and sensitizing external allies under A to keeping data and communication safe under G. What we hope each person will do is take away that there are a lot of options, and then they decide what it is that they're already doing. If they're doing it, they give themselves a yes. If they're not doing it, but they believe it's important, they give themselves a no. If they're doing it to some extent, they give themselves a somewhat. And if they really feel this is not applicable in their context, they give themselves a not applicable. And this is important because that way the overall score you get in an area doesn't reflect what someone else thinks you should be doing. It reflects what you yourself have said is necessary in your context. Each of these surveys, when they're completed, is self-scoring so that the organizations can see where they have variety internally. So organization 1, you see under letter C, documenting harms, they have an 83%. They're doing a lot there. But in cross-cutting area of emergency, which is CC1, they only have a 20%. They may want to put some more emphasis there. It's also important because people see opportunities to learn from one another. We always bring people together, CSOs, community, civil society organizations together to learn from each other. And so you can see here that organization 1 could share a lot on data and communication with organization 2. But organization 2 could share a lot with organization 1 on cultivating external allies. So there are always opportunities for internal learning on how to keep staff and organizations safe. The second step is a workshop. And I know I need to go quickly, Omar, so I'll just say that this is really a chance for people to take their survey results and decide what their own priorities are. Again, all of this is contextualized. The organizations look at their major risks in a systematic way and then decide on specific activities to address those risks. This is the formula that we use to help people think about their risks. They want to imagine a very specific risk. So for example, we have here peer educators at a specific hotspot will be arrested during outreach. That's the fear of the program. They think about the threats that make this risk more likely. So in this case, there has been verbal abuse and commodity confiscation by law enforcement, which sounds like a common occurrence for many of you all. The vulnerabilities they feel they have is that outreach is done by peer educators who are more likely to be harassed. It occurs at night and transport is on foot. So those are the vulnerabilities. And then their capacities are that their peer outreach workers carry ID cards that show they're connected to the Ministry of Health. They go in pairs. They have airtime in case they encounter issues. They're ready to share a non-controversial message, and their whereabouts are tracked via logbook and GPS. So we encourage CSOs, civil society organizations, to look at this formula and decide, do we need to do anything to limit vulnerability or add capacity? Here, the organization decides, you can see in red, that they will no longer do transport on foot, they'll start to use taxis, and that they want to begin to have senior law enforcement trained on the objectives of their programming. So this takes away one vulnerability and adds one capacity. Obviously more could be done, but it gives you a sense of how to do that planning. And the overview is really that we want to go from here, which is I hope you're seeing a scale where the existing capacities are far outweighed by the threats and vulnerabilities. And we want to get closer to a situation where our capacities are equal to or greater than the threats and vulnerabilities. So we do that by adding new capacities and reducing vulnerabilities. And that's a lot of what we touch on and what civil society organizations learn from each other. We also go over some overarching recommendations, and we do this because we really want to make sure that the responsibility for the security of implementers is explicitly considered in the program plans and as a budget line item, and we try to support implementers in having these conversations with funders as well. And then we want everyone to know that a safe workplace is the employer's responsibility. So it's not the case that everyone should use their best judgment, right? Of course, you should use your best judgment. But if you're training peer educators to go out and do outreach, then the organization should tell them, if you are stopped by law enforcement, here is what you should say. Here is the name of our lawyer. Here is the lawyer's phone number. Here is what we will do to help if you are arrested, right? So those decisions lie with the organization to be communicated to the worker so that that person can then act according to what's already been planned. And then finally, step 3, we encourage everyone to leave the training with and then implement a security plan. And the security plan, again, is going to catalog your vulnerabilities, catalog your existing capacity, and then share the required capacity. So here the organization has said what they themselves believe is necessary to prevent a break-in and to prevent the client records being stolen, that they want to start having visitor monitoring logs so they know who's on site. They want to retrain all their staff on safe document storage. They want to talk to their landlord about their work, and they want to install bars on windows and doors. Finally, they want to have a log for security incidents so that they can track what's happening in the hopes that they can advocate with the donor for more funding around security. And this is a really realistic example of what ends up getting planned. And I want to highlight that while funding is necessary and important for security, a lot of this work can also be done without additional funding. So the stars here show areas that don't require more funding to be able to move forward. When organizations do require funding, and also because emergencies happen, we let them know about these additional resources and the support that they can provide. And I just want to end by saying, I really hope this presentation has given you a sense of the process we follow and the tools available. The original security toolkit, which I showed a picture of earlier, is available at the URL here. It is in English. The tools we're developing for the Middle East and North Africa will be available soon in Arabic, French, and English. And while they are Middle East, North Africa focused, we have continued to learn so much throughout this process, and there are such strong examples based on the hostile environment in the MENA region that they really are valuable more broadly. So thank you so much again for your time. And I know that working together, we can move toward HIV programs that truly do no harm, including to those providing life-saving services. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. We have a comment that I think maybe we can address before we move to the next presentation. It's actually two from Best Practices Policy Project, and one is related to the Mentimeter exercise. It says, if you want to respond, the difference for us is whether or not people are when video is on now. So the difference for us is whether or not people are profiled as sex workers. Almost all people affected by HIV laws and are sex workers or trans. So they are the ones who are other in that response. So that the issue is the sex work is criminalized. And another comment also from Best Practice Policy Project regarding to the last points that you were making. It says, this is difficult to hear when sex work is criminalized. Peer educators are trans people and or sex workers, so the police can arrest at any time. badge or no badge. So, if they're sex workers or trans people, even if they have identification, a badge, they'll
Right.
risk of being detained, right? So
Right.
that is something to have in mind. Just a reminder that you can put questions or comments into the Q&A section so that we can answer them at the end of the session. I think I'm speaking English just because probably I think we still have the translator with us in that sense.
It's okay. You could do either. It's fine. But I'll go ahead and respond.
Great.
Okay, perfect. So I really want to appreciate, do you want to say something more?
I wanted to actually ask you a question.
Okay.
Do you have any information on any knowledge on if programs fund any of these expenses that security and safety security kind of demand, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know of a case, for example, this person was harassed and she had to take private transportation because she would take the bus, and it was expensive, right? And there was nothing to fund that. Is there any information around that?
Yeah, so I'll start with these questions and I'll come to your question. That was and I really appreciate the 2 responses that were typed in. And please, if others have things that they want to share, questions or comments, those are also great. So for the question about the other relating to criminalization, this is really, really important. And I'm really glad that you brought that up. A lot of what we focus on security of HIV program implementers focuses on immediate risks that they face and the response to those immediate risks. So it's kind of solutions in to the day-to-day challenges so that organizations have the time and space to do work such as decriminalization. So if you're successful in decriminalization, you absolutely are safer in your implementation. But because that takes time, we really want service delivery to be able to happen safely or as safely as possible right now. So we really do try, although we talk about building allies, being able to work in coalition to do things like changing laws, we focus on those day-to-day things that can be done in a little more quicker of a time period. So we do have to absolutely work toward things like decriminalization at the same time. And what our hope is that by being safer day to day, we have the energy and the space to do that. To the second one about, when sex work is criminalized, they can arrest you no matter what. I really want to acknowledge and validate that point, and that does absolutely happen. What I have seen done, even in context where sex work is criminalized, is that through different approaches, including with local authorities, including with local law enforcement, it is possible to really explain what it is that the program is doing and why it should be protected. You are the most, you're the expert on your context, and it may be in your context you've tried that and that was not effective. So there are then, some other approaches that may be more effective. But in some places, even with criminalization, there has been the ability to protect or at least reduce the impunity of officers who are acting, including when they, aren't even carrying around their own badges, right? But working against the violence that law enforcement can do is absolutely something we can do even in criminalized context. For the question of funding, what I have seen done and what we do in some of our programs, depending, as I said, PEPFAR and USAID funding is what we're working with primarily. We have had some cases where we've been able to offer small grants because that was a local priority of the donor to be able to fund security. So for example, in the Middle East and North Africa, every organization that developed a security plan was then given the opportunity to have that plan funded or some portion of it funded and technical assistance provided to be able to carry that out. So it really does depend. Some of these things, again, you can justify not even necessarily because of the security question, but because of best practices, right? So sending 2 peers out at a time is absolutely a way to stay safer. It also has some benefits programmatically beyond safety. So there are costed issues that come with this that we do have. People are finding creative ways to fund, and in some cases they are explicitly funded.
Great, thank you. We have a few more questions and comments, but I think we'll retake them at the end.
Okay, no problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sé que hay unas preguntas o comentarios en la sección de preguntas y comentarios.
I know that there are some more comments and questions in the Q&A chat. We will continue and we will move forward, and then we will answer those at the end of the presentation. So let's move on with the next speaker. Sergio Lopez from Somos Gay will be giving us his speech. He's an activist, gay activist, and officer of Somos Gay organization, a community-based organization with innovation of strategies against homophobia, integral response of HIV, and promotion of human rights in Paraguay. Sergio will be speaking about the participation of young people, gay men, bisexual men in political processes, and how we can have these intersectional activities with regards of safe and protection, safe and security of this community. So welcome, Sergio. Thank you. Thank you, Omar. Thank you to all the team of the HIV 2020 conference organizers, that it's improving and it's giving steps forward for all these aspects that affect us. So let me also mention that on behalf of our networks, I belong to an organization called Somos Gay, but I also collaborate with a gay Latino organization that has to deal with these topics such as personal security and collective security. So I just don't want to move forward with this presentation, not considering this comment that if I understand exactly the best practices policy project as in the sense that, and well, coming from these complex circumstances and contexts, it is we need to develop this trust in dialogue with law enforcement officers, because that this situation has affected our communities. So I understand that I understand these proposals that in specific contexts or in different contexts we receive this technical assistance, and we love that. We love to receive that information because we can keep on doing our job without exposing ourselves, but also taking into consideration that it is really difficult for us as community, as organizations, to have or even to consider this idea of having or on developing trust within law enforcement officers. So having said that, I would like to speak about some other things, some other topics. I'm so grateful for Robin's presentation, because I think that she covered undetailed and expansively about these programmatic plans in order to continue offering the services which are critical for our communities, mainly those who are related with HIV, but also within some other contexts, such as the impact that COVID-19 has had right now within the HIV individual strategies. We cannot deny that, and even sometimes for all of us is naive to consider that we shouldn't adapt those strategies. I would also like to speak about my experience, my personal experience, but also within the process that we've been developed as gay men in Paraguay, but also as a catalyst of other movements and other social activities within the region. I would also like to speak about those issues that are relevant for me as a gay activist based in this context that not always are in favor of these social movements. So in that sense, I will mention two topics, and in that sense, we can move forward also. Also, I would like to speak about personal security, but how to build collectively this trust network so they can guarantee us these criticisms that sometimes we do within these social movements. We criticize to these oppressive systems, and sometimes it happens that it looks like these social movements turn into violence, but it is always seen from one perspective. And when these social mobilizations are announced, they say that they are radical, and it seems that they are done within this context that the guarantee of human rights are there. For us, those social movements that we organize are given in a need context, because all our rights have been violated from the colonialism era up to now, where we are just dragging all those bad issues. So how can we as organizations, as social organizations, how can we include these social movements, not only speaking about safety and security as a community, but also individually, and how can we as a collective, we can protect ourselves, and how can we discuss and we can include some more other networks. As for personal security and self-care of activists or implementers of those who are activists in a daily basis, it is important to highlight here the fact that this is an, a tipping point that are favorable for everybody. Let's say, if I can apply some self-care for myself, I can also apply those measures with my colleagues, with my peers, and we can use that as an activist activity, because sometimes we don't take care of that because of the emotional burden that we have in our work, by offering services or by giving these face masks in order to give or in order to face this new disease, and that also reminds us of these inequalities. Also, I would like to use this space on how we build this self-care culture among activists. I think that this is something really important, because during these days of social movements and just having this unified insight through all the Latin American countries, it is not possible to deny that through all these social movements, we are facing with these racial activities and the brutal activity from police officers like the one that occurred in the US. No, the root of all these problems, or the root of what we are just demanding and that we are protesting against for, has the same base in this patriarchal, misogynist, and racist basis. So we're just we're just resisting from several levels: the academy, the system itself, and the street activities. Another important topic in order to have this discussion, and for those who are interested, I would like to know what are the comments or what are the questions that you have. It seems that there was a question there that it's really important on how we as young organizations focused on young people, and that we are working with these social movements for our political agenda. They were asking why these institutions or the system itself are the first ones to deny our health rights, our human rights. So it is on our behalf that we need to organize a collective response, and that it's useful for more people. That's the priority. But mainly, I would like to talk about this lack of articulation within our organizations at several levels that are violent because of their nature. Sometimes we try to be part of national or international committees or any other working spaces where we don't discuss about these power inequalities, and in that sense, we have a problem. We just want to impact in a board or in a committee or in a place where this authoritarianism is replied. So we as resistance bodies, we just face homophobia, violence. We also face this patriarchal and racist violence, because these are our bodies that are still resisting to those type of violences. So it's important to highlight these questions. When we are not able to have access to these funds or even to basic implements, the answer for me of having this community-based willpower based on the context that we are facing and facing these inequalities, we can have these answers. We can respond from the organization level and from those lack of articulation. I mean, from those disarticulation processes, and without that doesn't mean that we will get out of funds or we won't be able to keep on working in order to provide our toolkits. Our role was always to offer services, and even though we're just given that, it is important to discuss how we're dealing with safety and security, not only for the staff members, but also we need to enable this discussion on self-care as well as on collective security, how we lead that, how we lead these social protests. And most of these responses can be given by the coordination with the authorities, and and also recognizing that. And that's why I didn't want to left behind this topic, because many times it is hard for us, and sometimes it is naive to think that we can develop this trust with these systems in place naturally, that are naturally there to oppress us. So I would like to finish that with that my presentation, and if there are some questions, if you let me know, Omar, what is the next step, because I think that this is really important. Yes, we have a couple of minutes more for you, or we can. I think that I think that the question that you were raising was that these organizations formed by young people have certain limitations in order to access funds. Because one of the main questions for those who offer those funds are the years of experience that you have, and that represents a risk for young people, of course. Because, yes, of course. And based on that also, I have at least an idea built here in my mind, because lately I'm really focused on naming properly this topic, or speaking about this in a proper fashion. As for the experience that we as young people have, many times I don't really know how to say it, but it is not really appreciated as in a way, for instance, with organizations that might be considered young organizations, but they are really adults in their own practice, because they remember, because they know that even from those agendas, financing agendas, that those who were in charge of that have more experience. But for me, the challenge is that we need to keep on demonstrating that young organizations have the skills and the capacity, and showing them exactly how things are done, demanding that. So sometimes it might be radical, but we know that there's the agenda, the financing agenda. We know that there are the donors, or that maybe they are not in bankruptcy and they are not facing this financial crisis. But even though we have this health crisis, that had turned to be beneficial for those businesses. So we need to change that. We need to change that surplus of money and to direct them to these young organizations, because we have that skills. We have that flexibility on creating these mechanisms to develop these campaigns and to adapt it to a generation that we are just aging. So in that sense, I would like to reflect on that from our young communities, that the problem is not in our lack of expertise.
This learning limitation could have been at one time because of age, but not due to a limitation of any youth, but rather due to the power or authority systems who were never guaranteeing equal access.
That's true, and also political will of young people in different spaces, in different arenas, because things are not given just because officers have the will to do so, and also this active participation in all those processes. So for me, I think that that's the key message of your participation. Yes, thank you very much, Omar. So thank you, Sergio. Now let's move on.
So before we end, we will try to come back to these issues. If you have any questions, please do use the question and answer box, and we'll try to comment or answer your questions before the end of the session. So now let's continue with Dr. Jorge Saavedra's presentation. He is the Executive Director of the Global Public Health AHF Institute at the University of Miami. He's also a member of the Gay Latino Regional Network and president-elect of Impact's governing board. He was the first openly gay functionary at the federal level, a high-level government civil servant, as the director of the National Program of AIDS in Mexico. Welcome, Dr. Saavedra. Thank you, Omar. Thank you for the invitation, and thanks to all the other presenters and for everyone here who is listening and participating. I'd like to say that I have a face mask not just because of COVID,
but also to remark that we need to keep on using, but also because we have Mexico and the US flags here. This is where I was born, in this border between Mexico and the US, in a border that it's not divided by a river, but at a desert. I was born, all my brothers were born in the US, but I was born in Mexico, and currently I live temporarily in Miami, but my house and my husband are in Mexico. So currently I'm like binational and I'm a migrant, and this topic, which I will talk about, is a topic that I have in my roots. So I will get rid of this face mask so you can listen to me.
Voy a tratar de compartir mi presentación.
I will try to share my presentation. I will try to share my screen. Mainly, I will show you pictures. I will show the pictures, and I will try to illustrate what I will try to convey with regards of this message of migrants. Let me know, Omar, if you see that my screen is shared.
Okay. Bueno, en esta ocasión creo que tengo que cerrar mi video para que salga bien, o puedo continuar.
Do I need to close my video or can I keep my video open? Yes, you can keep your video open, no problem. So I will focus on massive migration, because migrants there has always been from all the countries in many senses, from one country, from one undeveloped country to one developing country, then and so on. So from many places. The point here is, in this case, is massive migration, and mainly the recent massive migration that has appeared as a very important phenomenon, but also not only important, but also of main concern in Latin America, mainly in two specific areas. This area, which is Central America, but mainly what it's known as the North Triangle, Guatemala, Salvador, and Honduras, and the other one is Venezuela, two other regions of Latin America. So basically, massive migration from Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador, it's given throughout Mexico, and of course Mexico is not their final destination, but it is the US. But most of them really don't get to their final destination, and then some of them might get back to their own countries. And as for the case of Venezuela, they move through all around the world, but mainly to Colombia and to some of the neighborhood countries or close countries such as Brazil, Peru. It is not so closer, but they moved up to there, even to Central America and to Chile and Argentina, and of course Mexico, Costa Rica, United States, and Europe. So these are the massive migrations that I will speak about during my presentation, and that I will be illustrating. Mainly, well, specifically, you saw these images. Currently, these massive migrations are stopped because of COVID-19, because borders are closed. But here you can see this massive migration through one of the bridges This is from the Venezuelan side to the Colombian side, and this is from Guatemala to Mexico. So practically, if I don't tell you that this is Guatemala, and if I don't tell you that this is Venezuela, you might think that this is the same. It's just a bridge full of people, full of desperate people that they just want to abandon their country in a massive way. So this is the main concern of this situation when we speak about massive migrations, that they are desperate people, that they want to get a better future, not only from the economical perspective, but also from different social situations and social conditions that later on we'll explain. As for the case of these two groups of massive migrations, as for the case of Venezuela, most of them, once that they cross to Colombia, they don't have resources. They don't even have resources even to pay a bus. So what they do is that they walk through the roadways, they walk several kilometers, and sometimes they walk even thousands of kilometers in order to reach their final destiny, where they might have relatives or where they might have people that they know. So in this case, it is really difficult to see them how they walk through Colombian roadways in order to reach their destiny, because they don't even have money to pay for a bus or to pay any other kind of transportation. This is how you see it. Sometimes they are isolated or they are moving in groups, but you can see how desperate they are in order to get a refugee outside their country. In the case of Mexico, Guatemala, Mexico, when the bridge is closed, when they cannot cross, well, they just get down and then they just cross through the river. This image portrays that crossing through the river. And I can tell that this is like a massive runaway to Mexico for those countries from Guatemala, El Salvador, and Nicaragua. In the case of Mexico, it is no bus, but what they use is a special train that it is called the Beast. The Beast, because it's really dangerous. Many of them fall and they die because the train doesn't stop to see who fall. And then these are not passenger trains, but they are just load trains, and then they just transport themselves as they can. I've been able to see this in person. It is of great impact. Even just by looking at the pictures, I mean, you cannot see it as dramatic as it is in life, and how dangerous it is to travel under these conditions. And once they reach the north border with Mexico and the U.S., of course, they find that there is a wall, and that sometimes they just climb over it, but not necessarily they will jump. This is the border with Mexico and the U.S., and these are the Central American groups that are trying to move from Mexico to the U.S., and that won't be allowed. This is in Tijuana, when it ends the land and then it goes onto the ocean, and then the wall is over there, even over there, in order to stop these migrations. In some cases, they are just received with this tear gas. And this is a really dramatic situation that they are facing during these massive migrations. These are just the circumstances that they face, letting them know that they are not welcome to enter the country. And this is just like the American dream that they are not allowed to live. And sometimes when they cross the border, they are able to realize this, to live this reality that happens in the U.S. when they are just under these big cages, as if they were animals. And it's not only done with animals, but also with children. Within all these massive migrations, we also have gay members or LGBT. They might be openly gay, or sometimes they might not be open within their own countries, but they are open migrants once that they move from their countries. In the case of Central America, they just move on and they are just walk These are from Venezuela, and just as the rest of the other migrants, they just keep on walking on the sides of the roadways in order to reach several cities and several countries. And during their walk, they are Central American migrants in Mexico that they were able to get a ride to move them through their next city. In Mexico, within these migrants' caravans, we knew that there were many LGBT members, even though they were not openly LGBT, but they were hidden, but they just announced that they were coming. So as for the case of Mexico, we organized a money collection for these migrants that they were arriving to Mexico. We granted some economic support and basic products of easy transportation, such as food, and for these LGBT migrants. I mean, and it was not only for LGBT migrants, but also for in general. No, this was a campaign that we developed. In the case of Mexico City, there are some other institutions that also can support LGBT migrants openly. So with this money collection, in the case of Mexico City, all LGBT migrants from Central America were received cheerfully, were received also, and some tours were organized. So they visited the city, they were invited to several parties and many other places, because finally their final destination was not Mexico City. They were moving throughout Mexico to reach the US, but at least we wanted to give them a welcoming message, not to make them feel rejected. And it was not only for the LGBT community, but also for the trans community. Some of them that they were not openly trans before crossing Mexico, and once that they were in Mexico, they were able to feel themselves comfortable, and openly they disclosed their trans condition. So, and that doesn't mean that other problems are solved. That only means that there are some other countries that the risk is lower if you openly state that you are a member of the LGBT community, makes you feel safer. And that doesn't happen in some other countries. So this was on December 18, which is the International Migrant Day. They also include trans men, and so even they called themselves the first trans gay caravan while they were crossing Mexico. During this period, they were able to call themselves Trans Gay Caravan, and this was run in 2017. Here they are at the border with the US. Another group was called Diversity Without Borders. So when I'm speaking about these massive migrant groups looking to get a refugee or looking to get a better style of life, of course, it includes LGBT communities that not necessarily are visible within their own origin countries. And that is an additional factor besides the economic aspect that some of them are facing, or maybe that this is the main reason why they just migrate in order to get their political freedom. Another factor is the rejection that they face in their countries because of this homophobia and discrimination aspects. Mainly in those countries of Central America, Honduras, El Salvador, and Nicaragua, they were able to get this refugee as migrants because of this homophobia situation. They were able to get this refugee, and they were also given this statement of migrants. Also, I would like to highlight that most of the LGBT migrants, not only in their origin countries, but one of the main risks and problems that they are facing is HIV and AIDS. And here I would like to give an announcement, because in AHF, we have programs in Mexico, Guatemala, Panama, Colombia, Peru, Brazil, Chile, and Argentina. So in all of these countries, if you are a migrant, and of course, if you are openly belonging to this LGBT community, of course, we will try to get you antiretroviral medication, and we will have all these efforts. They won't pay. AHF doesn't pay for this medication, but they try to give the services. And they are trying to get most of the cases to offer these ARV treatments for migrants, for those who need it, and specifically for the LGBT community. So in these Latin American countries, it is convenient to tell them, if you move on and if you are going as a migrant to all these countries, AHF can help you to get your ARV treatment. Of course, AHF, is not in all the cities, but it's located in the capital cities of these countries. It is a resource that can be used. Also, I would like to mention that, well, Colombia here is mentioned in the city of Cucuta, which is at the border with Colombia and Venezuela. They opened here a clinic, an HIV clinic, but it is exclusively for Venezuelan migrants. They, even those who are not migrants but that are able to cross to Cucuta, in order to get ARV and lab studies, that clinic was especially open and was especially enabled to provide ARV and tests services for HIV migrants from Venezuela. Even though they live in Venezuela and they just cross to that area to receive these options. Many of them cross below the bridge, and they know that they are just going to get their medication, and in some cases they allow them to pass, and not always, but they know that these services are there. And then so all of them that they reach AHF. Here we have the offices in the US, and they will do the best in order to get their ARV treatment in case they are HIV positive. I just want to highlight here because these are the zip codes of the cities in Miami. What it is highlighted in red, you can see the zip code where most of them do not have this viral suppression. This was a study carried out in order to see the viral load suppression. And this zip code appeared in red. And this area covers a specific section in Miami of Venezuelan people living in Miami. Most of the problem that they have in their origin countries, they are just having them. And the important thing is that it has to be solved in their destination country. But this is shown in the lack of attention and care that they had at the beginning in their country, in Venezuela, and that this result is also reflected in this country, in Miami. Latin America is the only region in developing that do not have this criminalization of homosexual sexual relationships. The last country on eliminating the national law that criminalized homosexual relations was in Panama in 2008, and this was a coordinated activity held with these activists from Mexico and from Panama, because the first international AIDS conference was going to be held in Latin America. So we started sending this message that from all Latin American countries, the only hotspot that will be highlighted publicly was Panama, because it was the only country in Latin America that still had a law that criminalized homosexual relationships. Fortunately, they moved the LGBT activists from Panama act on time, and we were able to eliminate that. Just before starting the AIDS International Conference, Panama announced that law that it was eliminated. So as of now, and well, that doesn't mean that homophobia doesn't exist. No, That means that there are no national laws that criminalize relations between men that has sex with men, and that doesn't mean that there's equal marriage in all those countries. No, that means that as a difference from other regions in the world, in Latin American countries, there is no laws like this. That doesn't apply for the Caribbean, region. Most of the islands of the Caribbean, the biggest island, Jamaica and Haiti, this doesn't apply. I'm just speaking about the Latin area of Latin America, for those who speak Portuguese and Spanish. We can say that there's no country in the Latin American region that have this law that criminalize homosexual relations. You have 1 more minute? Sure. Okay. And not all the countries are gay-friendly. For big cities, for gay-friendly cities in Latin America, I might count them because I know about them, and this is just my perception, also with data and information that I gather directly. Buenos Aires, Montevideo, Mexico City, Rio de Janeiro, Sao Paulo, Rosario in Argentina, Curitiba in Brazil, Santiago in Chile, Guadalajara in Mexico, Bogotá, Colombia, San Jose, Costa Rica, Lima, Peru, and La Habana, Cuba. Even it sounds difficult in La Habana, they accept. The image shown on the right-hand side is it's a guideline for LGBT people, and where we have like this shrine clinic to provide self-services and care for people living with HIV. So thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, Dr. Saavedra.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saavedra.
Los canales de nuevo.
¿Tú me puedes intentar compartirla?
Tú lo puedes hacer, creo. Quitar.
Lo estoy tratando de encontrar. En cuanto lo encuentre, seguro lo hago. Pero bueno,
Bien, bueno, mientras solucionamos eso, podemos abrir el canal para preguntas.
We can open now the channel for comments and questions that you might have about Dr. Saavedra's presentation with regards of migration in Latin America. You spoke about Central America, where we can face migration, massive migration movements. If you may allow. Yes, Gonzalo.
Quería yo un poco continuar con la intervención del doctor Saavedra.
I would like to reiterate here the sense of the comment given by Dr. Saavedra. I live in New York City.
Una ciudad en donde
and this is a city where
nos enorgullece decir que somos una ciudad de inmigrantes.
We are so proud to say that we are a migrant city, and in the US, I say that New York City is a very unique city, and it has this uniqueness, and it is a special state, because for me, I can say that this is not the US, and in Mexico later we say that after Mexico City, everything is the state of Mexico, and here I can say that after Mexico City, everything is the rest, everything is Cuautitlán. In that sense, that we are a city form of migrants, and I'm myself, I'm a migrant, and this migration issue, it's a phenomenon that in Mexico it's lived forever. This is a phenomenon that has appeared and that we are facing on a daily basis, and even now with this COVID situation, it has not stopped. Here in New York, we still receive many Latin American citizens trying to get a better opportunity of life, despite the fact that the authorities of the US follow a policy that we all know, and for those who are detained, they are just left in these cages at the border, or they are all in prison all around the country. And still, even that, we are still receiving more people. It's amazing to see how even with this situation that we are facing with COVID-19, we can see how this situation, in terms of those who had supported and in terms of those who keep on making that countries continue valid in their activities, are migrants. They are the ones who allow them that to happen. So, and with this situation of COVID-19 has given us another perspective on how to face the situation. And it has been also those HIV activists, those who had worked through all these years, are the ones who are facing and are the ones who are giving a response to COVID-19 also. In Mexico, for instance, it is unfortunate that as for this new reality that we are facing with COVID-19, in many places, in many states of the country, new laws has arisen that are criminalizing people living with COVID, and not also by giving them fines, but also by putting them into jail. The serious one of the states that develops that is Aguascalientes, that even they give 10 years of incarceration as of this reason for living with COVID. So this general situation has also given a response in the sense that it has been led by HIV people. During all this period, I can highlight that as for migration issues, always lesbian, gay people, transgender people, they have always been present. Here in New York, that situation is really clear, and not only in big cities, but also in small and medium cities in this country. We have Latinos, men and women communities that they are working, and then we know that we have transgender and gay communities within all these communities. So there are also organizations that are fighting against HIV criminalization, and we have had the possibility to work together with PWN women here in the US, giving support to what Dr. Saavedra mentioned with regards of transgender people, mainly in Ciudad Juárez in Mexico, where some transgender activists were waiting to get asylum. They get rid of their funds and they get rid of their medication. So this network started a campaign together with PWN, the US, to provide them or to offer them the services that they needed. Fortunately, that was done before the COVID-19 crisis started. So right now, they are under this process of asking for asylum. Some of the other things that COVID has risen is the fact that how we are able to see how terrible is the system, what a mess is the system, and this has been valid or prevailing for so many years. It has shown the worst from the capitalist system. It has also shown us that we are disposable and that they don't care of what happens to us. They don't care what happens to these communities that don't have this economical power. So all the things that we had faced here in the US, mainly in New York City, shows that the people are just organizing themselves in different social movements, and this is just a great example that this system has been created, and it is based not only in oppression but also on getting a profit, and that's the only thing that matters to them, and the rest they consider us as disposable. And unfortunately, most of the people look at us like that we are disposable, and this is something that we need to keep on fighting. We need to change that, and mainly we need to refresh the memory to all those that none of what prevails, none of what exists with regards of what we can enjoy, we as people living with HIV, not only in the US but also in many other parts of the world, has been given by the governments. That's not true. Everything that we have has been taken, has been received because of the effort and the job and the suffering that we had had. Nothing has been given by granted. Nothing has been given by free. And this is, yes, thank you, Gonzalo. And this is this is a topic that Jorge was also mentioning. We needed to do this lobbying. As for this topic of migration, we need to connect these topics, migration and all the things that we are discussing here, as well as the political will of all the involved. Speaking also about gay and bisexual men. So within the framework of this discussion, we wanted to discuss about safety and security for gay men and bisexual men, as well as for MSM. And we know that there are other populations, we are aware of that, but we just wanted to centralize this discussion within gay men and bisexual men. So if the 90% of your comments has been with regards of this topic, was because that was the objective of this session. And that doesn't mean that we are against the others. No. So as for the topic that Jorge was mentioning about migration, the idea is to link it to safety and security within the migration process from Central America to the US. They face many risks, and Jorge mentioned how at a certain point some migration groups receive certain care services while they were in Mexico. And in that sense, we offer empathy, security services, what we consider is needed. Also, one of the comments that were posted in the Q&A, and that I think that Jorge already answered, is the situation that migrants live once that they are in Mexico. In all the countries, there are migrants, and there are several needs that they have to face and they have to be covered. So we also need to consider that even though there are countries that might have small groups of migrants, there are some others that have big groups. So we need to offer their services. We need to provide those services, mainly for those who are formed by these vulnerable communities. Is there any comment or any question from the attendees? I kindly invite you to open your questions into the Q&A chat box. While we wait for that, I don't know if some of the panelists would like to give an additional comment. Yes, Omar, I would like to give an additional comment. It is also important to remember that for those migrants that know that they are living with HIV and that they receive ARV treatment, it is important to negotiate with their clinic or with their physician to get at least treatment for 3 months, ARV treatment, because as for the country that they might reach, they might be able to find medication, but that doesn't mean that they will receive it immediately. There are certain bureaucratic or administrative procedures that they have to follow, and that might delay the delivery of the service. So maybe if they consider that they have ARV for 3 months, and as soon as they reach the other country, if they start finding how to continue the treatment, it is important for them to have a reservoir. This also applies for those returning migrants, for those who are deported. mainly from the US, but also from, well, not only from the US, but also from Mexico. They can negotiate those packages. There are so many institutions that offer migration services that they know that for those who are deported, they can give 3 months of ARVs. And it is good for them to ask for it, because if they are deported to Mexico, at least they might have some other 3 months. But sometimes the reality is that it is not immediate, no? It is not that they can say, I just finished my treatment and then it might take even 3 months for them to receive it. So that is important, and it is supposed that in Mexico, that all around the countries, the capacity centers can offer these services, and they can offer medication for 3 months. And once that it is legalized, then can get it. But the thing is that they need to ask for it, or if they don't get the specific counseling to reach that negotiation, I mean, they can do that. But also mainly in Mexico City, where there is this clinic, and it is important for all of us to know about that services that are offered. Any additional comment from the panelists that they would like to include?
No como una panacea, ¿no? Porque aquí precisamente en Nueva York.
For this topic, we need to say that Mexico City is, that New York City is one of the cities here in the U.S. that we receive so many of the benefits that in some other countries, in other cities, they don't even have. There are many Latinos, that young people that mainly they don't receive the treatment. So this is not something that even though we say that they can get it and it can be done. I mean, this is not truly true in the sense that they will get them immediately. They have to follow a procedure, they have to follow a process, and in that sense, it's important to remark that, because in Mexico since 2019 there was a shortage of antiretrovirals that affected thousands and thousands of people there. And even today in Mexico City, there are people that do not have access to their medication because of that shortage, because the federal government decided that they were going to cut with the vendors and with suppliers of this medication. And they just did it without taking into consideration and without being aware of any of the consequences. When the person in charge at the National Palace in Mexico, if they were asked, he said, well, yes, there will be deaths, but that always happens. So we need to be aware of that also. Yes, it is important to highlight that. There's always certain limitations, and also we need to know that there are certain processes that have to be followed according to the context, and as well as according to the country. Yes, and in the US depends on the state. As for all these topics that Robin had discussed with regards of the service implementers, there was a comment in the chat, Robin, that I would like to speak about. They were saying that it was a little bit sensitive to say that sex workers can work together with police officers in order to reduce. So I think that it is important to highlight that depends on the context, because sometimes it happens that it could be possible, and then yes, it had happened and it's working, but in some others, as of today, is not possible. So it is important to remark that. We know exactly that everything depends on the context and the circumstances, as well as on the experiences of each one of the countries. I mean, and not only at a country level, but also regionally and at the municipal level. I'm from El Salvador, but it varies from municipality to municipality. There are certain differences. So I don't know, Robin, if you would like to convey any additional message with this regard.
Yeah, thank you so much, Omar. And I appreciate that comment from the participant. It really is true that everything is context specific, and there's not any one security recommendation that I would give that is always true, right? Like everything is context specific. So you, as the implementer in your province, in your town, at your hotspot, you know what's safe and what's not. And the reasoning behind all of our materials is that you are in charge of deciding what's right for you. So we lay out a variety of options. We give case studies that other implementers have found to be beneficial, including in criminalized settings. And then it's really up to that individual implementer to decide what's right for them. And I know people have tried really hard to work with law enforcement and had terrible experiences. And it's not to say they need to revisit that again. Certainly, it's really about here's the whole world of things people have tried, so that you can get ideas if you want them. And if there's a technique you don't ever want to try again, then that is absolutely your choice. We really think that people are the best place to know what's right for them.
Thank you, Robin. Gracias, Robin. Yo creo que es importante, ¿no? También que veamos esto.
I think it is also important to mention in this, to include in this discussion all those tools that might be useful to the job that we do, to the activities that we perform, or with the people that we work with. There's a term, adaptation. You adapt whatever is outside in order to implement it through the inside. So that was the remark that I wanted to mention here. There's another question specifically for you, Jorge. I think that it's in the Q&A chat box. The access in the Cucuta clinic has been complicated from the beginning of this pandemic for those who live with HIV in Venezuela. I don't know, Jorge, if you want to answer specifically to this person or if you want to make it openly. Do you mean the beginning of COVID-19 pandemic, or what do you mean? Well, it says that at the beginning of the pandemic, yes, so I'm assuming that it's COVID-19. I don't know if he has received care and attention in the Cucuta clinic. We don't really have any authority level with these migration services. We know that with the network of Venezuela, of people living with HIV, as well as some other organizations, they are the ones who negotiate. I don't know how, but they negotiate with the migration authorities and they let them go through because they had received them. It's been complicated, yes, but they do that. I don't know exactly how they do it, how they negotiate. I don't know if they have to give money to the officers, so they let them go, or if they just go below the bridge. So I cannot recommend those risk situations, but if they are receiving treatment in Cucuta, please get in touch with the person in charge of this clinic in Cucuta, so they can give you counseling and they can advise you how to do it. We might think that there might be a person that can cross and that they come back to the Venezuelan port, then that could be another alternative. Of course, that doesn't apply for the laboratory tests, but at least for the delivery of the medication. Yes, it is complicated because mainly the relationship between the governments of Colombia and Venezuela are completely bad. But I know that in some cases, local authorities there, the migration officers let them go because these migrants told them that they were going to the AHF clinic. There was another question in the chat box. They don't say where are they from. And it says that I'm a 49-year-old person living with HIV. I've made bad decisions, and right now I'm living the consequences. So I'm just looking for an organization that can help me.
Está en México.
He added that he's in Mexico. As we are running out of time, maybe can we share the emails if you feel comfortable with that?
No digo el nombre.
You can share your email, so maybe to give him a follow-up and to give more specific information. If you agree, if you can answer him privately. We still have 2 more minutes to close the session. I would like to invite each one of the panelists to take 30 seconds to end and to give their last statement. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, Jorge, Omar, Sergio, and Robin. It's been really educative sharing with you this presentation. Speaking about safety and security, police officers are not there to protect us or to give us security. They are always being there to protect the powerful ones. Police officers always arrive at the end of the crime, but not before. And then whenever they reach the place, they make the things more dangerous. So as for the case of the LGBT and transgender community, police officers, they have never been and will never be our ally.
Sí, también me gustaría hacer eco de eso.
I would like to support that statement. We come from different contexts that are really violent, as Gonzalo says. Police officers, they are not there to protect us, but they are there to protect private territory. And they are not there to protect native or indigenous people. I mean, if we are just native from this own planet that we own, we are there. And I just wanted to remark an additional comment. We need to consider digital personal security as well as collective security in those for those organizations, for those who have these online campaigns or virtual campaigns. Sometimes it seems that they exchange information and it might be easily to hack or to develop this espionage. This is something also to consider within these digital safety considerations. So I'm so grateful for this participation, and I'm so glad that I shared this space with those relevant panelists. Robin?
Sure. So thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to be here with you all today. And I just want to highlight, two things. One is that anything that I shared today, I'm sitting in the United States. We're supporting countries around 35 countries in the U.S., right? In the U.S., 35 countries in the world. So all the examples I shared came from other locations, right? It's an international program, primarily in Sub-Saharan Africa, Asia, somewhat in Latin America. We operate in the Dominican Republic and Haiti. So completely, again, I think the points raised about law enforcement, including law enforcement in the U.S. and who police in the U.S. protect, and the Black Lives Matter movement and what they have very clearly shown about who is and is not protected. I didn't come to speak on behalf of police. I just came to share, things that we've seen people, implementers, who are key population led, what they have said has worked in their own context. So again, whatever people feel confident with in their own context, I completely support, and we just are happy if our processes can be useful as you decide on the options, best for that context. So thank you again for this space and for HIV 2020 organizers.
Gracias, Robin. Jorge, unas últimas palabras.
Y sobre todo para
Okay, one last words. Yes, mainly for LGBT migrants, I would like to kindly ask them or to suggest or to insist them that before doing this migration, just to get informed not only on the risks that they will face to the country to the city that they will visit, but also considering these support resources. There are some organizations that might help you, that might support you, and in some countries and as well as in some other cities, there are several governmental facilities that are expert on supporting. Not in all the countries, not in all the cities, yes, but some of them will have these services. As we say in Mexico, let's not migrate in a crazy manner or without being informed. We need to move and we need to get informed as the best as possible before moving to another country, to another city. We need to be informed on what are the things that we can take advantage for any situation that we'll face. Living with HIV or not, it's good to have that information. before reaching that city or that country. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to all our panelists as well as to all the attendees that collaborated with your questions and comments. I believe that this is a topic that can be discussed broadly. So let's hope that this is just the beginning of this conversation. In the comment chat, as well as on the Q&A, they are just exchanging emails with the panelists. So before leaving, you can see that and reach them. Or otherwise, in Google, you can write down their names and you will get that contact information. So thank you very much.